All right, welcome everybody. My name is Jason Haddix. Thanks for having me here at NahamCon. I want to thank everybody who's behind the scenes, Ben and all of the production crew for putting on a conference. I know it takes a lot of people to get something going like this. Also, thank you for all the sponsors for making it possible. Today, I want to talk to you about Red AI. And I've done a version of this talk before at an AI symposium around security, but I haven't really done anything that was specifically towards bounty. So that's what we're going to do today. Is we're going to do, some investigation, and hopefully I can inspire you in how to use bounty for, or how to use AI for bounty in your day-to-day life. Now, I'm not going to give everything away that I have, all my secrets and all my bots and stuff like that, but hopefully I'm going to give you enough juice so that you can get out of this talk and start thinking about how you can supercharge your bounty hunting. Now, my name is Jason Haddix. If you've never met me before, I have done offensive security for about 20 years. I have done red teaming, I have done pen testing, I have done bug bounty, and now I am a full-time trainer and I have my own company called Arcanum. So look out for us and let's get it started. All right, so if you look at bounty methodology, you can roughly chop it up into a few parts, right? Mostly, Recon. The first stage is one of the things I'm really known for is finding assets, right, to attack as part of a wide scope bounty, or sometimes even a narrow scope bounty or a live event or something like that. Then you have application analysis, which is you breaking down the application, understanding that you need to go deep or you need to find a way to find places to attack in your methodology. Then you have the actual attacking, which is exploitation, very similar to any other red team practitioner. If you're a pen tester or something like that. And then you have to report your vulnerability to the client. And then you also have to take care of your tools, right? So there's some presidential quote I think, as like Abraham Lincoln said, like if I'm going to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend a lot of time, sharpening my axe or something like that, right? So today we're going to break down the bounty methodology, the high level bounty methodology, into sections, and I'm going to try to inspire you on how to use AI in each different section. And so hopefully this will be a good talk for you to get started and start building your own tools to supercharge your bug hunting. Now, AI itself has an abbreviated methodology into what you need to do to set it up. And so I made this slide to kind of talk about, our AI methodology. Excuse me. So inside of an AI methodology and how you're going to use AI for anything, not just hacking like we're going to use it today, you have to make some choices, and we have to talk about a couple things real quick, and then I'll tell you what I chose to kind of use for today for you guys. So the first thing that you need is to make a choice on your model. Now, there are many models out there, right? There's definitely, a lot of people use GPTs, right, from OpenAI, the GPT store, to make a lot of things, and that's what we're going to use a lot today because it's easy to show, some of that in, the slides. But also there's Anthropic's models. Llama 3 is, definitely the most strong, host yourself option that exists right now. And so there's a lot of models that you can choose from. What I encourage you to do in this first part of model choice is basically to understand what each model is good at. So, right now Anthropic's models are really, really good at coding, but you'll have a hard time using them for offensive security because their safety restrictions are so high. In some contexts, they won't even let you do red team code or work on red team tools. And so what you'll have to do is really understand what your model's good at, what it benchmarks really well. And, normally I get that kind of information from benchmarking articles that come out, through Twitter or through YouTube influencers that I watch who are benchmarking these models, or through white papers or through the self-posted benchmarks, but you have to be careful with those because sometimes they're fudged. So really you have to understand, what each model is good at. A lot of people right now in the model choice are using a lot of OpenAI still, a lot of Anthropic for general coding, Llama 3 to keep everything in-house if you want to build AI systems that are in-house. And then there's obviously a whole bunch of other models, right? Those aren't the only ones, but they're the predominant ones that I use, in my workflow, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Then you have to decide, okay, am I going to use RAG or system prompting to build my helpers, right? And so RAG is retrieval augmented generation, which basically means that you use search or local embeddings of documents to help your bot be smarter. or your system be smarter. And system prompting is providing a bunch of context inside of the conversation with the AI bot when you start it, when you make like a GPT. And so if you've ever made a GPT before in the OpenAI store, when it asks you that section of, what does your GPT do? Well, that is system prompting. That is the prompt before you start chatting with the bot. You can describe all kinds of stuff, and we're going to go through that today. Then you have to make some decisions about whether you're going to use agents. And agents are kind of all the rage right now, I would say. Agents are, basically defined as small mini bots, and mini bots, can go out and do very specific things, like they can go out and just be a search for you, or grab documents for you, or whatever. And agency systems are a whole bunch of microbots, usually overseen by a larger bot that stitches them together and to do a giant task. Now, agents are all the rage right now, and they're being talked about as, they're going to be the next thing. The problem is just in my, experience, agents are just not there yet. They're just not as good as system prompting and providing a bunch of context to, just a regular chat system, like a GPT. Then you have to think about your temperature. And so your temperature is a control that you add to your bots, and it basically instructs them how to be creative, how much creative to be. And so you can set this in the OpenAPI, or the OpenAPI. You can set this inside of the OpenAI system settings when you work with the API itself. So it's basically a feature flag that you put in there, and then you put your temperature rating from 0 to 2. Lower temperature meaning it's going to be more literal, higher temperature meaning it's going to be more creative. And then to make your bots smart, you need to feed them with a lot of context, which we're going to talk about today. So today, our choices that we're just going to show for this is we're going to use OpenAI GPT-4, and we're going to use the GPT-4 store in most of our examples. Now, that doesn't mean for all of these things that we're talking about today, I haven't gone another way, down the line. I do have some agency systems I've built. I do have some RAG systems I've built that are good for certain things, but mostly everything today, you can do a pretty good job with just using a GPT that you build in the GPT store. We're not going to use any agents today. If you were to do any of the things that we're going to do today, I suggest you keep your temperature lower, because usually working with technical data is something that you want to keep the temperature low. Usually in security, when I'm making bots, I usually keep the temperature pretty low. And then for context, really how I built a lot of these prompts is based off of a framework I'm going to talk about, as well as A/B testing and just trial and error. But I'll give you some resources as well at the end to check out if you want to learn more about how to supercharge your prompting and context. Okay, so one thing before we get into it, there are a lot of gotchas with working with AI, but the two most important gotchas that you can run into is you can trust the bot, but you have to verify everything that it comes out of the bot. Basically, bots are still prone to hallucination, and so even if you're going to use these tools, you have to verify every time if you're taking data out of them and you're trying to use them for submissions or anything like that. And then also you have to know that your bots have a cutoff date as to what information they have. They have, GPTs was, the end of 2023. GPT-4 was the end of 2023. I believe they're going to have another cutoff update pretty soon. Anthropic has another cutoff date, and so that's the last snapshot of data that they had that they trained the model on. And so anything newer than that, they're not going to have information on unless they have the ability to do internet search, in which many of our bots today do. They are, most of the ones that we're using today, we're building in the GPT store. So you can click the button that says, enable internet search, and they will have the ability to use search for most of our stuff. Okay, so let's talk about prompting real quick. So my prompting skill has evolved over, like a year and a half, 2 years of working with some friends, and I would be remiss without mentioning them right now in the presentation. So one of my best friends in the world is Daniel Nieser, and he makes this framework called Fabric. And Fabric basically is a framework to use any AI model and bootstrap it with a bunch of awesome prompts and awesome frameworking around it to just make AI kind of easy and usable on the command line. And they have a GUI for it, and really it's a fantastic project. Now, my prompting ability and my inspiration to do prompting came from Daniel's very simple markdown structure inside of Fabric. So if you haven't seen Fabric, the project, I'd highly suggest going, giving it a Google. It's on GitHub and seeing what it's all about. Also, JD, XSS Doctor, works with me on building the class that I built around AI. So today you're looking at some of the red team stuff or some of the red stuff inside of the class, but we have a whole 2-day class that we're doing on security or on AI for security. So those two guys have taught me a lot, and we've worked together on a lot of things. So they're fantastic, and check out Fabric. Okay, so let's talk about prompting. So when you're building a prompt, a system prompt, this is the kind of text that goes before your conversation with the bot. And so with Daniel and I and JD, we've come to the the decision that most of the things that we need to do in AI is possible by just writing really, really, really great system prompts. And as the context window, as the amount of text you can work with inside of the AI systems gets bigger, the better we can get at that because we can put more stuff in there. Now, when we build really great prompts, a lot of people, ask us what these are. So I'm giving you an example of one of the bots today. I'm not giving you all the bots, but this is the one that I made for Recon in the Recon section for acquisitions. And so I structure my bots and I separate them by Markdown, which seems to work really well by separating these sections inside. Now remember, some of this stuff with building prompts inside of LLMs is black magic still. It's crazy. So here I say, hey, you are an expert. There is there's a lot of debate on whether telling the bot that it's an expert actually does anything. I find that it does in my prompts, even though I've talked to academics who say it doesn't, and then I've talked to people at OpenAI who says it does. So, pick your poison there, but I say you are an expert, and for this specific bot, we're talking about you're an expert and a thorough business intelligence bot. You scour the internet for sources that can help find acquisitions of organizations. And so that's what I'm building this bot for, is to find acquisitions in the recon phase of bug bounty. Its sources, I tell it, you always check crunchbase.com. It is your primary source. It is, for me as a bounty hunter, Crunchbase is where we get a lot of acquisition data. And then you also check Merger, PitchBook, Google, Wikipedia, OCC, Aleph, finance@yahoo.com, and others. And so I basically set up its sources for it with a primary source that it should use. So this is the first stage of the system prompt, but you'll see that there's many other stages. In the second stage, I say your instructions. Take a deep breath, relax, and enter a state of flow as if you've just taken Adderall mixed with amphetamine salts. Now, I know that this is, I actually don't know if Naham Khan's a PG, kind of con, but this is not because like I'm into that subculture or anything like that. It's actually been proven that if you give, bonuses to the bots and you tell them to enter certain states, that they perform better. And this has been A/B tested and by academics. And so I put this in the instructions because it makes the bots work better, which is crazy, I know. And so when I teach this class, when I talk about using bots, I talk about this section as weird machine tricks because it works, but it's crazy. And then I tell it, when asked about a company's acquisitions, you reply by formatting each acquisition per line with the date of acquisition and the source found, etc. You focus your collection on the most up-to-date responses, etc., etc. So here is, this section, the instruction section, is actually where you're telling the bot, what to do and how to format its responses. This is a section that's worked really well for me and a lot of my bots, is called related research terms for your persona and instructions. And so you can think of this section much like SEO keyword terms. And so when you're building a site to perform better with search on the internet, you usually seed it with keyword search terms that are very similar to what you're trying to sell off of your website. And so the same thing can be the same thing can be done to help bots understand exactly what they're doing. And so in this case, we're building a recon bot. So I've said OSINT, recon, business analytics, business intelligence platform, company insights, and acquire. And so this I hadn't really seen a lot of people like talk about, and since doing this in my bots, this keyword and persona instructions related research terms has been fantastic to supercharge my bots. And so this is a tip that I'm giving everybody. I have A/B tested this over at least 150 prompts, and it makes my bots much, much better. And I haven't seen any academic research off of this at all. So Um, there you go. The last area is rules for how you reply. So I tell it to reply in bulleted sentences for this bot. Always link your sources, which is important for this bot. Always be deeply thorough. And sometimes you can repeat these things just to make sure that they go off with a hitch. And then before printing the screen, double check everything. So this is the structure of a bot. And you can see that's about half a page of text, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, of the system prompt and how you build a bot. And so this hopefully can give you some inspiration on how to do one of these. Now let's talk about how we can apply this prompting to different problems inside of Bounty. So let's talk about Recon first. So the first section in Recon is usually to deal with subdomains, right? So you have a target, and you need to find subdomains. And a lot of us will use tools like Sublister and things like that. But eventually what you'll get to is more esoteric ways to find subdomains. And so JD, Jonathan Dunn, XSS Doctor, built a bot called Subdomain Ninja. And Subdomain Ninja, what it'll do is it'll take your already found list of subdomains and you can upload it to the bot, and it builds permutations, just like permutation scanning tools do on the command line, except for because the bots themselves and the large language models are built out of natural language, they can actually do this really, really well. I wouldn't say better than some of the other permutation building tools, but at least as good as. And so this Subdomain Ninja tool will do exactly what a lot of your permutation tools will do it. So JD had given a list to Subdomain Ninja here for Temu.com, and then it came out with a whole bunch of basically permutated subdomains that he could try as well. And he can feed these to a resolver and find hopefully some endpoints that he hadn't found before from his just regular scraping of subdomains with things like Subfinder and stuff like that. So, so this is a very simple idea. There are two other tools out there. I did one on the command line, and then I can't remember, there was another one on the command line too that did the same type of idea, but this bot will just be on the GPT store at some point when he releases it. And so this is a super easy way to use AI just to get your mind wrapped around the kind of things it can do for you. Now, in the acquisitions phase, I talked about the acquisitions bot, right? And so on the left-hand side, I have the acquisitions bot, of which I gave you the prompt for, right? And then on the right-hand side, I have a screenshot of Crunchbase. And so you can see that there are some differences in the output on both of the bots. And I found this in my research when looking for acquisitions. I have found some acquisitions that my bot has given back to me that Crunchbase didn't have, and I have found some things that Crunchbase has had that my bot didn't give to me. So so I actually run both in tandem when I'm doing research, and so I use the bot and Crunchbase and Merger and PitchBook and all the other sources that you'll use for acquisitions and wide-scale recon. So so you can see that it can be useful. Remember to verify, right? I think one in here, Wager.inc, is an acquisition of Yahoo Sports, which I don't know if it falls directly under Yahoo in their bug bounty program, but when I looked it up, it was acquired by Yahoo Sports, and it wasn't in the Yahoo acquisition in Crunchbase. So just again, trust but verify. Now let's talk about web analysis, because in Recon, a lot of this stuff is still getting built out. When we have agenting frameworks and more mesh to do command line stuff, it'll be way better to do a lot of the Recon stuff. But let's move on to web analysis so that we can talk about some of this stuff. So in this section, the first thing I want to say is that there is a bot that I've built. It's called Arcanum Cybersecurity Bot. It used to just be called SecGPT. It's one of the best, I think, bots. I've put about a year of prompt engineering into it, maybe even more actually, probably a year and a half into building this bot, and I use it every day. Now, it is built for generalized conversations with offensive security people mostly. But it also has a whole section in the prompt area, which I'm not giving away here, but a whole section in the prompt area about giving defensive advice, up-to-date defensive advice for security people to give in their reports and stuff like that. So here you can see on the right, I've given it a prompt, up above, which you can't see, and then it has given me some preventative measures using, to use DOM Purify and then avoid dangerously set inner HTML for React, I'm guessing was the question I gave this one, right? So if you want just like a general partner, and I'll be honest with you guys, right? Like a lot of people think you need to know everything in Bounty, right? And in offensive security, and it's impossible to know everything in this field, right? If you want to just be able to ask some dumb questions, which all of us need to do every once in a while, this is a great bot for that. Just to converse with, ask questions about a tech that maybe you don't feel as strong about, things like that. So the Arcanum cybersecurity bot, this is one that's already open out there on the GPT store. You can check it out. So here are some of the things that I will tell you that I ask my bot to do sometimes when I'm working with Arcanum cybersecurity bot, right? And so a lot of times we're working with JavaScript, right? So um, I will paste in a large chunk of the JavaScript code into the bot, and I'll say, what can you tell me, HTML and JavaScript, what can you tell me about the frameworks, the libraries, the technologies? Can you parse out the API calls or routes for the app? Can you attempt to deobfuscate or unpack any of the code in the app? What can you tell me about the authentication methods for the app or API calls? Based on the functions you see, do they all require authentication? For each function, can you create me some minor documentation or curl commands to execute? Can you parse all endpoints and routes and build a full list of URLs for me in a bulleted list? And can you identify possible syncs for XSS, DOM XSS, or DOM cross-site scripting, which I give it 3 names for the same vulnerability there. These are the type of things I can ask when I paste in code. Now, when you get to be working with these bots a lot, what you'll understand is there is a context window, meaning how much memory the bot has and how long it can remember in a single session, how much text it can take or characters. And so when you start pasting in large amounts of JavaScript, you'll go over your context limit sometimes for the bots. But normally just to get this type of information and just to use a couple, chunks of JavaScript at a time, I can get really good information by asking, the Arcanum bot, things about, the application like this. And it gives me really, really good information to move forward into kind of my discovery and exploitation phase. So the next phase of the Arcanum bot, or I haven't decided, whether it's going to be another bot entirely, but is to look for statistically relevant areas to hack. And so before, Gunnar Andrews and I did a project called susparams, and I did a project called Hunt a long time ago with Bugcrowd people, where we parse out from statistical data around vulnerabilities the most likely places where certain types of vulnerabilities live, whether it's the route name or the parameter name. And so you can see on the right here, this is for SQL injection. And so you can see those words on those lines there saying process, string, ID, etc. Those are the most likely parameters to be subject to SQL injection. And so the next version of the bot, I will build this list inside of the bot. And so when I paste in that JavaScript, it will also tell you a whole section on, hey, make sure to check here for these certain types of vulnerabilities. And as the context windows gets larger, I can dump this whole project into the bot, which will be fantastic. And so this will be like version 2 of kind of that general cybersecurity bot. Now let's talk about exploitation a little bit. So there was a paper that came out relatively recently in 2024 in April, and it talked about, can a bot system exploit vulnerabilities by itself? And the answer was with GPT-4 and enough context, actually it can. And so what these researchers found, if you read this white paper, is basically that if there's a full known attack string, the bot and the system that they made of their LLM agent could successfully 40% of the time exploit a web vulnerability usually. And, but it is also, that's a pretty low, rate compared to just using a dynamic scanner or something like that. And so, this is still in the works, I would say. And so while this was kind of impressive, it also needed from the CVE data a full attack string, right? It needed to know exactly where the parameter was, the route was, the URL, whatever, and then it really what the bot was doing is just shoving in, the domain for, some other domain and saying, okay, cool, I'm just going to substitute these and attack and see, and parse the response and see if I was correct. And so they could get this to do this a little bit, but also um, you can see that the pass and overall success rate is, actually not super great. So this is still a work in progress. Can an LLM system agent go out and do automatic pen testing? No, it can't. Not yet, at least in my mind. But can we use LLMs and AI to do some cool stuff? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's a bot that I made called the XSS Mutation Engine. And so what I did here is I did a ton of research from my career, from a lot of people out there on, basically um, what it looks like to bypass a weak cross-site scripting filter, right? Many times when you're in bug bounty, you'll have a customer who will patch um, a cross-site scripting vulnerability with a weak regex, right? And so what happens a lot of times is bug hunters will go back to look for, a bypass and get paid extra. And so this bot basically will take an attack string and build it either to bypass filters or use different event handlers. And it will build these. It'll build 10 of each examples, one of using different filtering and encoding. And so basically, I wrote about a 2-page prompt here on all the different ways to bypass really weak filters, and then and all the different event handlers that could be there. And so this bot, you just give it an attack string, and it will give you those types of things. So this can help you find regressions, and it can also help you bypass weak filters that have been implemented in the first place. So this is to give you some inspiration, in that area. Well, what about undisclosed CVEs? So a lot of times you get these CVEs that get disclosed privately to a company by a researcher. And as a bug bounty hunter, well, not everybody has patched yet, and so maybe you want to go out and try to find that vulnerability. But there's no information. There's nothing on Twitter. There's nothing on GitHub. There's nothing, in the disclosure to CVE details or any place like that. Okay, so I built a small bot where I gave it a persona of, to look at basically the description that is reported by the vendor to see if it can deduce where or how I could try to exploit the vulnerability. So here I have utrack, which is a product by, man, I can't remember the company right now, but it's a pretty big product. I think JetBrains, yeah, utrack is by JetBrains, I think. And so I said, hey, I saw the security issue description. Can you deduce how the vulnerability might have looked? And I gave it a thing. I said, utrack stored XSS via Markdown was possible reported by this researcher. So it gave me a whole bunch of stuff, and the most interesting part was it says, here's an example of a vulnerable scenario. So they probably exploited it with an image tag with JavaScript alert XSS, and then it would be, rendered in Markdown as image source XSS. And so this is trying to deduce, what was a private disclosure. Now this was cool, but not incredibly useful. Could have been something completely different, where Markdown was being parsed. But I asked it to do some other stuff as well. I said in the prompt, when I built the system prompt, I said, hey, also, after you're done deducing, can you tell me about some ways to bypass common ways that people protect for the vulnerability? I wrote it more eloquently than that, but it gave me this, and it said, okay, so here are 2 examples of bypassing, common brittle filters for XSS and Markdown injection. So here you can see you can break up the image on 2 lines as a broken up protocol bypass. And you can, instead of doing, a very verbatim kind of image tag, you can use basically a data URL. And so these are 2 ways that I could go back and look at anyone who has that software and try to deduce where the input was, but then try these 2 attacks. And maybe I would be able to bypass a weak brittle filter that, JetBrains had implemented. And so undisclosed CVE bot, this is still very much in beta, but this is to hopefully get your juices flowing on, kind of how this kind of stuff could be useful. Okay, now reporting. So kind of the bane of both program owners and bug bounty hunters world is reporting. And so basically, I take a lot of time in building templates for my bug bounty submissions and my pen test reports. But recently, almost a lot of my reporting has been augmented by AI. And so you can build really great bots to do really great things. So I'm going to give some examples here. So this is Bounty Please, my reporting bot. And so what you have with bug bounty hunters is like, you have this race to disclose the vulnerability, and they won't admit it sometimes. They will drop a vulnerability with just like, hey, there's an XSS and param like this, and then they'll submit that sucker. and they'll get in first as the first identifier of the bug, and then they'll come back and edit it. And it sucks to be a program owner to get that. And then it also sucks to be another bug hunter who like, puts time into their reports and then like, whatever. And then, someone else technically got to it first. Wouldn't it be great if you had a bot that, could do it almost as quickly? Well, Bounty Please does that. So I just set XSS and param like this. And I have built, a little bot to, expand upon that. So it says the title, the vulnerability type, the CVSS version 4 severity, the date I submitted it, the vulnerability details, the record endpoint is vulnerable to cross-site scripting, the steps to reproduce, proof of concept with HTML or basically a post or get request, technical impact and business impact. And so these are all things I asked it to provide me in the system prompt whenever I just drop in an attack string. Now I also asked it to give me, if it could, defensive suggested fix, because I find that developers respond really well when they get defensive information along with offensive information. This has been true in my pen test career. It has been true in my bug bounty career. Sometimes I've gotten bonuses. Sometimes I've just gotten paid even though I was a second submitter of the bug because I've given defensive information. And so it first tried to do a very generalized suggested fix, which was kind of off kilter a little bit, although the CSP, could work, etc. It also provided the developer with a curl request, which developers really love because then they can basically reproduce the bug with curl, which they know they don't have burp like us a lot of times. The security people do, but the developers don't. And then it gave me DOM Purify code, which is very boilerplate, but could be a good suggestion for for the security team to implement in their web application, is to use DOM Purify to do sanitization of input. And so giving a developer this level of suggested fix is something that can be coached out of a bot, which is which is really cool. And so you just have to take the time to imagine and A/B test your system prompts over and over until you get something that you like and works. And remember, you have to verify these things because sometimes they don't work right out of the box. And sometimes I submit, any of these bots I could submit 1 or 2 times to try to get the right output. And I'll tweak the temperature, I'll tweak the system prompt over and over again until I feel like I'm getting, the correct output I need. But you can get this level of stuff inside of, from a bot. Okay, so let's talk about tooling. Um, so if you want to use basically an LLM inside of your Burp Suite, well, you can do that. So Burp GPT is a project that allows you, is an extension basically, a Burp extension, and it'll allow you to have a system prompt inside of Burp and ask it questions inside of Burp, and it'll be able to look at all your Burp traffic, which is fantastic. Very similar to, the Arcana bot does a lot of this stuff, but it has a more verbose system prompt. But you don't have, you have to paste your stuff into the Arcana bot. Here, you can just ask questions of your traffic right inside of Burp Suite, which I think this is fantastic. I I see a world where Portswigger actually does this themselves very soon. If they haven't already, I don't remember off the top of my head. So yeah, this is absolutely fantastic and absolutely a tool. Although remember that your security data from your security tool is now going out if you're using OpenAI here, which this is, right? It says GPT in the upper right-hand corner. But once someone builds this into something that could talk locally as well, like maybe Llama 3, then you can still get this kind of value out of a bot that lives locally on your machine. So this is continually updated. Okay, so what about building quick vulnerability checks? Some of the best bug hunters who are top on the lists everywhere on every bounty hunt or bug bounty platform, they're really good at writing automation, and so you can do that as well with several bots. So here is one that JD wrote called Nuclei Ninja. Nuclei Ninja, you just pass it a proof of concept GitHub link or blog, and it will parse that sucker and basically build you a YAML template for nuclei. I have used this upwards of I think 25 times now to build really, really quick nuclei templates. I also built one to make one to do Shodan queries using using a whole bunch of Shodan tools to make Shodan dorks. I've also used this to find verbatim bugs in building custom subdomain takeover checks. It's absolutely fantastic. So Nuclei Ninja that JD wrote for our class is fantastic, and it'll just give you a YAML template. Here he's doing a remote object reference leak detection script in YAML, which is pretty easy because all he has to do is look for a base URL and then slash leaktest.aspx, which is incredibly easy for this bot to write, and it's trained on all of the Nuclei documentation, in the GPT-4, type of in the GPT-4 training, the last version. Now, let's say you're an internal security team, or you use Nessus, right? And I know this is a bounty thing, but also there's a lot of things that I didn't include in this presentation, which are red team focused, and security engineer focused, and blue team focused, and purple team focused. This is only a 40-minute talk, so I tried to focus on just stuff. But this is one that kind of is on the edge. If you use Nessus, Nessus has its own templating language called Nazzle, which you have to be, pretty in deep into, writing these things. But we also built another bot that basically will do this type of stuff and build you a Nazzle script. And what what we do here, and what worked really well for me in the past, not only just in Bounty, if you were going to make a scanner with Nuclei, but at a couple of the companies I worked at, we had chat channels, and if you're a security person, we would drop in a new exploit we saw on Twitter, or it was making the rounds via the news or something like that, or maybe it dropped on GitHub or something like that. And so we would drop it into this chat channel. It had all the developers in it, had all the security people in it, and then we would kind of vote, do we need to do something about this outside of our normal policy or process? Do we need to move on it now? And so we did use Nessus at one of my places of work. And so if the answer was yes, and Tenable didn't already have a check for the thing that we had deemed needed to be checked for, sometimes it takes 1, 2, 3, even 4 days for Tenable to come out with a check for a certain web vulnerability. But we wanted to be able to scan for it quickly, and so this is something that we could have used, really well in our process, in that using that chat channel, so we could build Nessus scripts really quickly. Okay, so that is the end of just the quick inspiration kind of thing that we can do. Now, if you want to know more, basically, I had 45 minutes today. I have 2 days of training on red, blue, and purple use cases and all the source code for the bots. If you're interested in checking out the class, there's a link. Also, we run a consultancy where we're doing red teaming and penetration testing at Arcanum. So you can reach out to us at our website. And thanks everybody for having us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.